Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson about United States government. This is part one of several video lessons. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so what are we going to cover in this video lesson? We're going to talk about the key questions of politics. We are going to look at some key vocabulary. I'm going to give you some definitions so that way you have a starting point, place to work from. And we're going to look eventually at some context, historical context for the United States in order to understand our government and how and why it functions the way it does, how we started this, why we started this great experiment for the world, as de Tocqueville called it. You need to have a little bit of history. So I'm gonna go through that in later video lessons. But this is just a brief introduction into U.S. government, the foundations of it, the philosophy of it, the hows and whys of how it got started. As we move forward in the course, we'll obviously get into more details about specific aspects of the Constitution, the three branches of government, political participation, interest groups, all kinds of fun stuff like that. And given the fact that this is an incredibly intense election year, more so, I think, than in most previous election years, this should be very, very interesting, very, very engaging. There's a lot that we need to understand so that we can make informed decisions going forward. All right, so key questions of politics. There are three. What is the proper role of government? Who governs? And to what ends? Okay, so what is the proper role of government? Who governs? And to what ends? When you're thinking about a political system, either making one from scratch, modifying an existing one, or throwing out one in favor of another, these are the questions you need to ask. If you want the government that you create or that you have to do what you feel it should, you need to have answers to these questions. So when you think about the proper role of government, you want to consider the following things. How involved should the government be in our day-to-day personal lives? Should the government be able to tell you who and how to marry? Should the government be able to dictate what kind of job you have, how long you work, who you can, if you run your own business, who you can or should hire, things of that nature? How much control should it have over the economy? Kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but that's the questions of employment, questions of in healthcare, many cases, these day-to-day operating daily life issues. How much control should government have? How much should it have over our personal lives? How much should it dictate what we can say, what we can think, what we can do? These are things you have to think about. Who governs? Who is in charge of actually running the government? Who has the authority to do that, right? And how do we provide that authority to them? How do they get that authority? And to what ends? What are the goals of people who govern? What are the goals of those who are governed? Okay, so I want you to pause the video right now and I want you to just jot down a couple of thoughts. You can take, I don't know, 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, however long you want. And I want you to just give me a sentence or two, write it in your notebook. We'll talk about this in class or in our virtual sessions. I want you to answer each of these questions for yourself. It doesn't have to be super detailed. This is just a starting point. So pause the video, answer each of these three questions. All right, so if we're talking about power and politics, we need to look at these two things. So politics is the art and science of governing. All right, it's the act of running a government effectively. And we say art and science because there are specific, very clear, empirical, or quote unquote objective things that government handles. But there's also an art to it. How do you convince people that your idea of how to operate public utilities is the best idea as opposed to someone else's idea of how to do it? So it's both art and it's science. So that requires some deeper thinking. Power effectively is the ability of a person to get another person or people to do what they want. So if you can get people to do what you want, you have power. So therefore, ergo, political power is the art and science of getting other people to follow your political views, beliefs, actions, and judgments. Okay, and that's in a democratic society, in an open society, you have a lot of different people competing for things, competing for the establishment of their ideas, of their views, beliefs, actions, and judgments. In a closed society, you have one entity or a small group of folks that control that. They can dictate what those beliefs, views, actions, and judgments should be. All right, so authority versus legitimacy. These are things we need to think about, and given what's happening in the United States right now, these are very, very important questions. So authority is the right to use power. Legitimacy is political authority conferred by law, public opinion, or a constitution. You can have authority, but if the people that you have power over don't view you as legitimate, then your authority goes out the window. So I'm a teacher, right? I have a certain amount of power in my classroom. That authority, that right to use that power, has been given to me by the Department of Education. It has been given to me by my supervisors, by my assistant principals and principal. It is given to me by virtue of my certification, by my education, right? But I can have that authority all I want, but if you, the student, don't find me legitimate, if you don't find me trustworthy, if you don't think I know what I'm doing, if you're questioning my motives as to whether or not I care about your welfare, then all that authority is meaningless. You can have authority in name, but you will be able to accomplish nothing without the legitimacy that effectively gives you that authority. And this is a debate we're having right now where people are questioning the legitimacy of certain government officials, the president, people in Congress. And so it's important that you understand these two concepts because they're inextricably linked to how government functions. All right, so democracy. Okay. Everybody is all about democracy this and democracy that. We need to actually understand what that is. I find that a whole lot of citizens run around proclaiming democracy, right? And they have no idea what democracy actually is. So what is it, right? So democracy means sovereignty, that political power, political authority belongs to the people, all right? The people that exist in the society, that political power, that political authority, that sovereignty belongs to them, okay? Now, there are two types of democracy. There's direct, which is usually participatory. All or most citizens hold public office and make policy. Traditionally, this is majority rules. You have all the citizens come together in one location, right? Something is put up for a vote. Everybody votes. The majority vote carries the day. So whatever 51% of that voting body votes for becomes law. The other 49%, if that's the split, well, the 49% lose out. They have to live with what the majority decides. Now, what we do not have a pure democracy, nor do we want one. And we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. We have an indirect democracy, all right? Citizens elect representatives to make decisions for them, okay? A republic is another term for this. I think that's the better term for it because it clearly separates a pure or direct democracy from an indirect, right? The United States is a republic, okay? We don't all go to Washington, D.C. and make decisions and vote on things, right? We elect people who go to Washington, D.C. or who go to our state capitals to make decisions for us, all right? So we don't make direct day-to-day decisions in the operation of government. We have a republic, and we'll explore why the founders chose that over a traditional democracy later on in the course. Hello, computer. There we go. All right, there we go. Okay, so some key vocabulary. Now, I'm not going to go into deep detail about these items. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to write these things down. When you write things down as opposed to type them, it helps it stick in your memory. And these key ideas are going to be really, really important as we move forward in the course. You're going to need to have this in your working memory. So representative democracy is another way of talking about what some of the terms I just described on the previous slide. So it's a form of government which representatives that are elected by the people make and enforce laws and policies. Now, in some cases, as in Great Britain, they can retain the monarchy in a ceremonial role. The Queen, the monarch of Great Britain, does not have legislative authority any longer. It resides in the Parliament, in the British equivalent of our Congress, okay? But there are two types of this representative democracy. There's parliamentary, which is the UK system. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. We have something different. We have a pluralist society, a pluralist economy, okay? Or, I'm sorry, a pluralist democracy, where it's a theory that views politics as a conflict among various interest groups, so political parties. Political decision making is characterized by bargaining and compromise. Okay, our setup is a little bit different. We have a president, not a prime minister. Where the way our branches of government are set up are a little bit different than what exists in a nation like Great Britain. But pluralism is central to making American government work. It assumes that there are a lot of different ideas, and those ideas will come into conflict with each other. That to resolve those conflicts, each party is going to get a little bit of what it wants, but it won't get all of what it wants. You have to compromise. Now, in this day and age, compromise is a dirty word with both parties and many people within American society. Without compromise, you have stagnation, and you can't move forward. You make the country any better because you just stay at a standstill because neither side is going to budge. So in order for a pluralist society to exist, you have to acknowledge the existence of other viewpoints and make room for some of their ideas. And you have to bargain and negotiate and discuss and debate with them. Without that, you can't have a free society. It's impossible to have without pluralism. Pluralism is necessary for a free society. All right, so additional key vocabulary. Again, you're going to pause, you're going to write this stuff down. We're going to get much more in the next video lesson, a lot more detail about political ideology, but that's effectively what it is, what it says right there. Now, there are a few major types of ideologies. There are tons of them, but we're going to focus on three primary ones. The first one is libertarianism. So you should pause the video, write this stuff down. And then the other two are liberalism and conservatism. These are the ones you're probably most familiar with. Liberals are usually associated with Democrats, and conservatives are usually associated with Republicans. But these are shifting a little bit in terms of what defines a liberal and what defines a conservative. What's happening right now is we have a lot of uncertainty, a lot of disagreement. We're at each other's. You know what? Let's just keep it real. We are at each other's throats. We are not being friendly. We are not compromising. We are not discussing. We're talking past each other. And a lot of people who identify as liberal, identify as conservative, actually don't fully encapsulate, symbolize the definition of those ideologies. So I want you to pause the video, write those down. We're going to get into a lot more detail about this in the next video lesson. All right. Authoritarianism. This is unfortunately fairly common throughout the world. The state exercises broad control over the lives of its citizens. Think China, think Russia, think Iran, think Saudi Arabia. Basically, any dictatorship, any society where the state controls everything, and if you go against what the state says, you are punished severely. North Korea is a good example as well. Majoritarianism, that's where majority opinions make all the decisions in the country. In that instance, the rights of the minority do not matter. And this doesn't necessarily mean a minority group, a racial or ethnic group. It could also mean a political minority, somebody whose ideas aren't as popular or are not agreed with by most of the population. So that's what that is. So you guys should write that down too. Okay, socialism versus communism. Okay. People are running around, I love socialism. I hate socialism. It's evil. They don't know what socialism is, okay? They don't know what communism is, and they're, ranting about it. So let's get some definitions straight. So socialism is where you have, in theory, political freedom. You choose your leaders. You can have some input in the laws that are passed, but the government owns the factors of production. The factors of production are the things that we use to run an economy, to have an economy work, to make stuff, to do stuff, to distribute resources. In socialism, political freedom of the citizens, but economic control by the government. Okay, that's how the theory works. Depending on which socialist country you go to, you have some socialist countries that do in fact do this, where you do have political freedom, but in a lot of socialist countries you do not. They say you have political freedom, but because the government controls the economy, and that involves money, he who has the money makes the rules. In some cases, there is no freedom. The political freedom is really in name only. It doesn't exist in reality. So it depends on the socialist country you're looking at. Communism is a whole separate thing. So communism is where a single political party controls both the government and the economy. So there's one party. This is very authoritarian. Communism, in the various forms that it has shown up in the world, has always been authoritarian. Pick a communist country, it's authoritarian. There's very little freedom for the citizens. They must do as they are told. Now, do not confuse communism with Marxism. Those are two different things. Okay, there was a guy named Karl Marx way back in the 1800s, and he wrote this thing called the Communist Manifesto. And his idea was that you would have an ideal society would be where all economic resources were controlled by the proletariat. That's what he termed them, or the working class. The people who were actually doing the work of society would be the ones that controlled the economic resources. This has never happened in world history. Marxism is just a theory right now. It has never come to fruition in actual practice. But there are a lot of people who claim to be Marxists, but many people confuse them with communists. Communists are a little bit different. So make sure to not confuse those two things. All right, totalitarian regime, again, write this down. Theocracy, government based on religion, pretty straightforward. Write this down because we're going to be studying those items. And some things to keep in mind when we talk about demographics. The United States is diverse. We are one of the most, if not the most diverse nation on the planet, and have been for quite some time. Now, this is where we run into some problems. If you look at some countries like, say, Finland, Finland is very monocultural, okay? They have one culture for the most part. There are some differences, but they have very low levels of immigration. Most people are the same race. Most people have similar religious beliefs. Most people have similar political beliefs. It's pretty mono, meaning one, similar cultural views. When you have people coming from different places with different life experiences, you have diversity, all right? So immigration and nativism have always been issues in this country, more so than I think for other countries because of how and why we were founded. And these questions have always been asked since we were founded. How do we Americanize immigrants? Should we even Americanize immigrants? Like, is that even something that should be done? Should we force people to adopt a particular group of cultural values? And what does it even mean to Americanize? Depending on who you ask, you'll get different definitions. So those are tough questions to answer. Diversity is a major factor in identity politics. A lot of people vote and organize based off of these politics. They organize based on race or ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, immigration status, all kinds of stuff. So this is a major factor in how our political system operates. So some key aspects of American diversity are listed below right there. National origin, race, ethnicity, religion, economic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and there are others. Those are just kind of the big ticket items. Now, when you have a nation as diverse as ours, developing a shared political culture, that's really tough. That's really hard because, I mean, look at all the diversity we had from the previous slide. I mean, that's a whole lot of diversity, right? So people have so many different opinions on a wide variety of issues. So how do you develop a shared body of values and beliefs, right? How do you even do that? So the essence of a political culture is you agree on fundamental principles. Right now, we're not agreeing on fundamental principles. You have a common perception, a common viewpoint of both the rights and obligations, responsibilities of citizens. We don't have that either. And there are rules for political participation that everyone are expected to follow. We don't really have that either. It seemed like we did for a while, but now we're doing this hard work of trying to restructure that, of trying to figure out these things. What fundamental principles of politics and government do we agree on as an entire nation, right? How can we come to common ground on these things? So how do we learn political culture? We learn it from public education as a big vehicle for that. Parents, mass media, peers, right? And how do we sustain a political culture? We also do that through public education. We have national symbols. Some people have suggested a national language. Our founders weren't really in favor of that because they wanted more people to come from other places. But so these are questions that we're grappling with, we're struggling with, we're trying to answer. And being part of a free society means that you have to ask these questions. You have to discuss the possible answers. You have to discuss them with people you don't like, that you disagree with. If you're not willing to do that, you can't be in a free society. Go to find an authoritarian society where it's dictated for you. In order to be in a free society and determine our own political destinies, we have to have these discussions. So we're going to talk about this over the course of the course. And these are our core values. Now, I'm going to pause the video here, and in part 2, we're going to get into what these core values are. But these are supposedly, and we're going to debate this in class, we'll see if you agree. Because right now, the nation is having a debate over whether or not these core values do represent the United States of America, or even if they ever have. So individual liberty, political equality, popular sovereignty, minority rights, majority rule, and economic rights. So I leave you with that. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I will see you in the next video.